On. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for this unusual council meeting in records, temperatures, etc. And for anyone who's watching, we've obviously moved downstairs because it's cooler and has the ramshackle summary nature of where we are. But don't worry about it, we're all here. Thank you very much for coming. It's warm. It's not as warm in here as it is outside, but there we go. Apologies for absence. We've got 3, I think, from Councillor Davis.
Fuller and Rycold.
Are you happy to accept those?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Declarations of interest, pecuniary, others, etc. I've got to declare I'm resident in Peters Road, that is 224903, and I work for Abbott School, which might be 225003. David?
Trustee of the museum in connection with whatever item it is.
I suppose me, isn't it?
2246.
3 museum trustees, museum item. And if anything else comes up, just announce it when we get there. Minutes of previous meeting, which separate, which is any comments, questions, queries coming out from it all? I'm happy to propose that I sign it if anyone's willing to second. Councillor King, is everyone okay with that?
Yep.
Great, thanks very much indeed. Sign as best I can. Thank you very much. Public participation from interested parties. We have a member of the public who's warmed up today. Anything from you? No. Well, thank you for coming anyhow. Consideration of requests from interested parties. North Heads Council.
Apologies from Councillor Harrison and Councillor Best.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Town matters. Receive an update on Fletton Field. This is the slightly complicated issues around our applications. Do you want to explain anything more?
After the June meeting, I submitted the expression of interest, which is to start the process if we want to get it transferred over to us. That then triggered an email from the head of property, who asked for a meeting. So I met with her, and she basically said that it's a little bit complicated at the moment. It's listed as land for development. That's what it came over from as NCC. And so on their list of assets, it's listed as development land. But they did say that she said it doesn't stop anything, but it just makes the process a little bit more complicated because it means that they've got to satisfy their auditors and their accountants that they do the right thing. Anyway, the conversation went on. She did say, she wanted to say that the NNC do want to support this, but they've just got a process to go through. Then I mentioned the ACV that we reapplied for in 2021, and she wasn't aware of that. Anyway, after the meeting, she went and looked. She came back and said, "Oh yes, there is one." That complicates it a little bit more because we've now got to go through that ACV process. So 6 weeks, a community group has 6 weeks to put in a bid. If they accept the bids, then we've got 6 months to raise the funds. So we'll follow that process. So she's going to write a report, speak to a few of the people there. We can't do anything at the moment. We're going to wait for that to come back and then see what the next step is.
So it's more complicated than we'd hoped, but such is life. Fletton Field Association are aware, aren't they?
Yes, yeah.
Fantastic.
So I haven't quite understood that because I thought the hope was that it would be effectively gifted to Amble Town Council, but you described that
No,
as.
not now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we won't
That
get
is
it for £1.
And they weren't interested in the leasehold idea.
No, they're not interested in setting up any leases.
Jerry, do you?
All I was going to say was that the Field Association committee met last night, and so they were updated so that they're aware. Yeah.
Paul?
So does it show as an asset on their balance sheet then? Has it got no value
Yeah,
attached
it's
to
come over from NCC.
So that'll be the audit thing, won't it?
Yeah,
Because it will have a significant asset value.
yeah, it's got a value on it at the
I
moment.
don't think there's any point of second guessing what's going to come. I mean, we've had very positive noises from the councillors, so.
I think you're
we'll
right,
just wait and see.
but that's the financial complexity of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that. Yeah.
And their policy's now quite clear, but this just makes it more hoops to jump through, and what will we?
Well,
As long as
from,
they can demonstrate to the auditors that there's been multiple attempts at getting planning and they've all been refused, so maybe it isn't development land, then maybe there's sensible value on it.
yeah,
Would it not be quicker for one of our friendly councillors to propose, I don't know how this works, but actually the thing is, if you like, reassigned in terms of its asset value on the basis that planning permission has been sought and refused on appeal. Because if it was then altered in terms of its asset value or asset description, might make the whole process a lot quicker.
well, she didn't say that, and she didn't say that was an option. At
Might
that
be
time.
worth, well, can we not talk to our councillors
You
and ask
can,
them
but
to explore
yeah.
whether that is an option?
as head of property, she was telling me this is your process, this is the process we've got to go through. And she is aware the council's been very positive about it, and lots of people being positive. But she said to me, this is the process that we've got to go through.
Fine, fingers crossed that we'll hear more in September, I suppose. 224502, an update from Heartstart and the first responders. There's a document in here which Rebecca has very skillfully put together of where all the AEDs are around the place, and they're being picked up and scattered around town, I think, aren't they, by Heartstart?
Can't start.
And so, yeah, it's good, and they've booked in some time in here from September onwards to do first aid courses, which is lovely. So it's all looking pretty good. 224503, Speedwatch Group. There's enough people for the group to operate. We've now got, as it says in the mayor's report I've sent through, a coordinator who's in contact with the police, community Speedwatch Group, and if everything goes according to plan, we should be able to get the speed gun September to November, I think it was, or October to December loyalty. But more I know. 224504 to receive an update following the meeting to discuss transportation traffic flow in the Riverside Hotel plans. This is something that the OBA set up with Councillors Harrison and Best and Smithers, we thought. David and I attended it last week. I put a sort of rough set of notes in the mayor's report sent around yesterday, describing sort of three key areas, a lot of which touch on our transport study and are in highways remit anyhow, but traffic flowing around the town, the marketplace encouraging pedestrian use, etc., and access to the A605. And one idea is that Helen Harrison is going to try and get a couple of highways, big weeks, over to Adel so we can just go around with them and look at some of these things. It's a long burn project, but attacking from different angles seems a good idea. The other one is the Riverside Hotel. Again, it's outside of our remit, but we've been involved with Ashton Parish Council now and talked to them, and Councillor Harrison's talked to Councillor Brackenbury, etc., and that's ongoing. But it's all about lines of communication. Is that fair, David?
Yeah, I think it's also perhaps worth mentioning that Councillor Best visits Guernsey about 6 weekly, and so had very kindly offered that he might go and actually visit Mr. Lane personally, which
Face to face.
might make it more difficult for him to avoid a meeting on the basis that the mountain has gone to Mohammed.
You did go through a phase of talking to council quite a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
The
all this
former
is,
iteration, there's a
it was
difference
a while ago.
between talking and hotels and on people's homes.
well, all of
And
this is,
XYZ 0,
No.
1, 2, 3.
That's just a point to keep having the planning,
Yeah, yeah.
because otherwise if you get planning and you don't start, then you know, there's a,
It's still doing it.
so it's all moving on in one way, shape or form. But hopefully in the next couple of months, something will come on more, both of those. 224601, Mayor's Report, I sent it through yesterday, I think. Stuff there about the cemetery, the royal visit to Prince William's School, that was all very exciting, and a hush-hush at the end of June. Top secret stuff it was. It's very exciting. They're opening the new sports hall area, etc. The mowing project down at Snipe Meadow, the cows who are really enjoying life and doing very well. The calf's now been named Norman. See, there we go. No, not parking the car place. A point there about a third attempt of getting an electric charge point company coming to talk to us about us being part of a trial with a free electric charging point out there, which hopefully the states will be able to consider next week. Some meetings about highways, etc. And the glory of giving away prizes at the horticultural show on Sunday, which was fantastic. It was, yeah, and it's their centenary show next year, which they were very excited about. So roll on the centenary. Clerk's report, next item down. Speed camera was the exciting thing on there.
Yeah, when we moved it, we then managed to get all the data off. Again, there's still quite a few people speeding.
Top speed going through town on West Street was what, 90 miles an hour according to that at one point. 4:30 in the afternoon. We checked the calibration of that. That's a long run up at some point. But even so, there's some pretty high speed. We sending this to the police?
I haven't at the moment. We sent it the last time,
Yeah, so
and
we're
they
sending this
did.
one as well.
Yeah, can do.
It's now moved on to Blackthorn Road, and it's very visible and shiny and lovely and green and thanks you at all the right times. So that's good. There was some conversation when we met with Charlie about a second one. One idea is he might be looking to get one. Is it worth us seeing if we could get a grant funding through the police commissioner for a second one?
Can do. You can look into that. Yeah.
When we originally talked about it, I thought we talked about smiley, scrumpy face one, but I don't think they're more effective. I mean, the one that we've got.
We can change it.
We can change it to
Yeah,
smiley
we'll
face.
change it. Yeah.
I do, when you go to other villages where they've got the grumpy face, I
Yeah.
think it's a bit more effective. Personal view, I don't know. No statistical data to back that up.
They do say that it's meant to be a good thing. Is it worth changing? Maybe
Yeah,
next
can
time we
change
move
it.
it
Yeah.
to a smiley face. And just seeing if there is money for a second one, because with that sort of data as well, the more information we have in the town, the more it is.
So that same device can do that as well.
Yeah.
All right, so it's just
Yeah, it's just
All right.
Thank you, but with almost all smiley faces. So let's change it. I think it's different. 224603, to consider if we want to make any nominations. The particular link that got sent through was about members of the council, I suppose, but I think the broader view from the Lord Lieutenant and others is that it's a really good way of recommending people in the community who are doing good work. And even if they don't get onto the honours list, the suggestion is one thing, and there are also lots of other levels with it, garden party invitations, etc. They're really keen to get as many nominations put forward as possible, because the more people get nominated, the better chance of getting awards. And the argument is that Northamptonshire is undercommitted at the moment. Not enough people are putting people forward. So if anyone has any ideas in the next couple of months, it'd be worth putting them forward, David.
Yeah, I was just going to say, normally, aren't these things sort of done rather sort of sotto voce? So discussing in an open council meeting possible names, and I've certainly got two that I wouldn't mind putting forward.
I think the idea was to raise it, and then it's really keen to support us with the application, certainly before our next raising the issue, and if anyone has any good nominations, Lord Lieutenant's offer.
The names can't go on behalf without asking.
I don't know whether we have to make a recommendation as a council with
Well,
an
that's,
individual.
okay, that's what I'm asking then.
That's
Is it a recommendation from Outdoor Town Council that you're making, David? Or
No.
a
It could be either.
recommendation?
I'm more than happy to copy everybody into an email I might send to Emma putting forward two names,
Yeah,
with a little explanation about both of them.
Yeah, you've got to do 500 words, not an explanation.
Oh, well, I was thinking in terms of a little explanation. I don't.
Just for us.
This,
For us.
yeah, I mean, I thought this was just providing details to Emma at this stage.
Yeah.
If you need 500 words, I'm sure I can come up with 500 words.
If we have some names to come forward, we can check with the Lord Lieutenant's office who manage them all anyhow, what their thoughts are, and they can advise us on the best way to move forward on that. 224604, consultation on the draft Hackney carriage and private hire policy and conditions. Do we have any strong feelings on this?
No,
I
it's
think I
on
read it.
last month, and it was just, we just deferred to this month. But
I think I read it, it said that they were merging things together. Sad news indeed, but obviously financial implications and staffing and other problems.
No, I think I was going to mention classifications because on the thing you sent, it said there's maybe obviously are the document that got circulated not applicable, but it is.
And just to second the disappointment as somebody with a young child for another nursery to go in the same year as Lyndon, it's a shame that another one has gone from Adel Town.
I suspect it's reflecting the staffing issues and the sort of regulatory environment for nurseries now. It's tough. If I'm right, they terminate at the end of this week.
yeah, they finish at the end of this week, and they'll be clearing out over the summer.
So would it be possible maybe for estates next week to go and have a little look around? Because I don't think I've been in there
I'm sure,
since my child or children were.
We're doing the whole of Flatton House.
Let's do it then as well. Brilliant. Can we also maybe formally thank the preschool for all the work they've done with, I know at least one of my children went, I can't remember which one, a long time ago, I'm sure.
It sounded a bit like Boris Johnson.
I'm willing to take any form of criticism. So that's harsh. 224606, consider a letter from Animal Museum regarding the lease.
So, sorry, can we go back then?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I hadn't realised you were moving on.
Sorry.
So are we saying that estates are going to discuss the future of that space?
I think it would be good for us to see it and discuss it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because they're obviously
Yeah.
yeah.
I know, only 5'4", but I am here.
Obviously, there's a possible income loss next year.
Exactly.
We can work out what we should do with it. Absolutely. 224606, consider a letter of Mandel Museum regarding the lease. David, do you want to say something about this?
Well, I think I ought to. The letter that came through, let's say it's only partially accurate, but it's not a criticism of Diana, but there's obviously some crossed-wires, to say the very least. So I shall take a few moments just to make sure that all councillors are aware of the background. And then I was going to walk out of the council chamber whilst you talked about it, if you wanted to talk about it. Where I'm going to walk to here, I'm not sure, but I'll find somewhere to go.
up to the other one.
I could go up to the other ones. It's a long way for somebody to come find me. The history of this is that a very long time ago, this council granted a lease to the museum for the courthouse. That lease has since expired, and therefore the museum is in the position of what we call holding over. So until somebody terminates the original lease, it just carries on, and could carry on in theory indefinitely. The difficulty for that, from the point of view of the museum, was that, particularly to open up funding streams and things, they need to be able to say, we have a long lease that's got X years to run, which is a bit difficult when you've got a lease that has no years to run. So they wanted a new lease, and the council instructed its solicitors to prepare a new lease. They then wrote, on behalf of the council, to the Museum Trust, and in broad terms said, you will need to deposit with us a sum of money, quite a substantial sum of money, because you will have to cover our client's costs, i.e. the council's costs. That also created a bit of an issue because essentially the solicitors for the council wanted to deal with solicitors acting for the museum. As I happen to be both a museum trustee and happily a solicitor as well, when the matter was discussed at a trust meeting, I said, well, look, I can deal with the solicitors for the council on behalf of the trust in the sense that I can get the lease, and if you can get the money to me, I can give what's called an undertaking to the solicitors that I will personally pay their costs limited to the agreed sum. Of course, I'm not going to agree to pay that until somebody has actually deposited the money with me. So the museum deposited the money with me so that I could promise the council solicitor that I would pay the council solicitor the council's costs. I myself had said to the museum trust, I'm not charging you for anything, and indeed, in a sense, I'm only acting in sort of quasi-solicitor capacity. I'm really acting as a trustee who wants to know something about it. A lease was then issued. Now, I don't want to get too technical about it, and indeed I'm not sure how appropriate it is, bearing in mind that I am in a position of sort of advising the museum trustees. Suffice it to say that the museum trust had a long-running issue about trustees who were worried about personal liabilities in the event of the trust running into difficulty. There are long memories in this town of what went wrong with the former East Northampton Citizens Advice Bureau, when people who had acted as trustees and had a lease of the NCAB premises in Rushton found that NCAB collapsed almost overnight. Incidentally, very, very shortly after this council had, I think, given them something in the region of £6,000, or it might have been 8. It was a lot of money. And it collapsed. And those trustees ended up personally liable under the lease. So not surprisingly, organisations have a little wariness about being in that situation because you're not going to get that many volunteers who want to take up the risk. So the trust decided that it needed to restructure itself, in essence, to protect itself. That was then delegated to a museum trustee who happened to be an Amber Town councillor at the time, but who didn't stand for the last election. And it turned out to be a very long and involved process, and I'm still unclear as to exactly where it is in terms of its finalisation. And of course, until the body exists that the council can lease to the museum trust under, you can't really do very much to finalise the lease. That's actually the reason for the delay. Nothing to do with this council, nothing to do with the solicitors to the council, and actually, I would say, nothing really to do with me either. I simply sat there waiting to get to a position. Now, as it happened, there was going to be a museum trust meeting, and I was going to explain everything to the trustees and just talk them through the lease. That meeting got cancelled. It got rearranged. You know where this is going. Got rearranged on a date that I couldn't attend. I gave my apologies. It wasn't discussed, and the next thing I know is that we had that letter sent to the council. The file is in my case over there, and when we next meet as a museum trust, I will go through that with the trust. I hope that, in fact, I will be in a position to have provided them with a written comparison between its existing lease and proposed new lease, so that every trustee has had an opportunity to see that. And once that's been sorted, I rather anticipate that the lease will move on. I don't think it will move on immediately because at this point everybody moves 3 paces away from me. But my entire office lost its entire secretarial staff, its cashier, its receptionist, and IT support. This week is closed due to COVID. There are three of us left standing, who don't appear, touch wood to have it, but I have nobody who can type anything for me at the moment. My typing is a bit like that at best. And when I'm trying to send 60 or 70 work emails in a day and receive probably more, and indeed yesterday I did that, and 6 hours of court hearings as well, I have to say that hasn't been my chief priority. But it will be done in time for the next trustee meeting, I have no doubt. So
Thank you very much indeed, David. So we've been asked to consider the letter.
The other trustee also do.
The other trustees, it's normally stay as it's passed as another interest. The reason Dave is left is because there's actually money changed hands. So he's leaving as it's a pecuniary interest.
It strikes me, having read it, that we're not really involved at all. You know, a councillor is involved in many functions within it. The council itself is not involved directly. Obviously, David's given an explanation. It's on video and audio. So, do we need to go back just for saying we discussed it and David's doing things about it, or do we need to?
I can go back to Diana and just explain.
I was just going to say, they're asked for any help advice you can give, so then sort of ask specifically for anything. I think they were just what it was given.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say, I am a trustee, is that, and I appreciate what David's just said and everything, and I totally appreciate it. It's getting ping pong and email, and I'm not going to read any more emails from. I just haven't got the time to keep reading emails. But the second thing is, what I would say is that at the moment we don't talk about the museum in any meetings I go to. We talk about the lease as a trustee, and I'm not sure.
The museum meetings.
Yeah. So in other words, anything that can be done to help support get this facilitated and promulgated and sorted, the better for the museum, probably. But I just. It's to me, it's just noise for me at the minute.
It's difficult because it just seems like it's the issue with having something drawn up that protects the trustees.
Yeah.
But that's not something that this town council can do.
It's not in our remit at all.
So are you actually moving to being the CIO or something else that protects the trustees? It's perfectly simple.
That's the point.
It's not.
You've actually hit the nail on the head.
Everybody does it
It's
now.
the constitutional changes
Yeah.
that have got to be made. And I think there's some confusion, and I don't know the answer to this, as to whether you have to have done that before the lease is done, or whether they can be done separately and actually don't affect each other.
Well,
I'm sure
they
that's
can
why
be. They can be done in any order. It is only about the degree of risk the trustees feel they're putting themselves in. So it doesn't matter. This town council can issue the lease to the trustees, and we are not really interested what your constitutional basis is, as long as it's sound and one that is recognised in the law. So it feels to me like
That's what
the
we've
lease
done.
has been issued,
Yeah.
and
It's
it
up
is
to-
for the museum to sort their own constitutional issues out, or just say, we'll take it as the trustees are currently constituted, then sort it out, and I'm sure our lease was just automatically transferred over. When we moved. There's no interaction.
As far as I remember.
There's absolutely no paperwork to suggest otherwise. It's completely transparent.
So do we need to do this formally, or can we just make contact with?
I can email Diana. I mean, I'll email what has happened here tonight, what's been said,
Let's all.
Yeah. And just explain that David has said that he intends to go to their next meeting and explain this, and hopefully.
If they decide to stay with their present constitution or make a change, that's what's deciding the base of things.
Yeah, if we're in agreement that they're not codependent in that sense, then we can get on with it, can't we?
I don't see a barrier except the willingness of the trustees. I absolutely understand all trustee bodies now want to go to, at the very minimum, a CIO. Absolutely fine. But I don't think you can blame any third party trying to deal with you if you haven't been able, I don't know, you know, generally speaking, if people haven't been able to sort that out, then it's not the third parties.
Quick question for the record, CIO in one sentence.
Charitable, no,
Charitable
charitable
something.
organisation, yeah. So that
Corporated.
limit, it's much more of a legal person
Right.
in the sense of a company is.
Yeah.
Whereas a traditional charity is the trustees.
That's right.
No, that makes complete sense.
And
It's an instrument.
it gives the protection that people who administrative, if you like, want.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been, but I have to say, as long as I've been associated with the museum, and that's from day one, there's always been this argument about them not being protected, not having the right charitable setup in the first place.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's
So we need to do
sort of
it.
done and dusted, but it's up to the museum trustees to sort their decision out. Should we call up Dennis to David? Please.
Turn him over. If he's
Tell him maybe, yeah, if he's under the grill or just in the back of him, sitting on the step.
You know?
I used to like it. It's all about the museum.
Yeah.
It's not like that.
Hi David, nice and warm up there. So just to summarise, you can watch the video back if you want to, but Emma's going to contact Anna and just refer to what we discussed tonight, and it seems to be that it's up to the museum trustees to work out if they want to move forward in their present state or with the changes you discussed, they're discussing, and we're here whenever that's decided, but
I
very
should
much in their call.
Perhaps I should have also said I was a little surprised to read that they've been trying to contact me without me actually speaking to anybody, because I've certainly communicated with 3 different officers over a period of time, as well as speaking at meetings. I'll sort it with them.
Check the email address, just in case it's going off into the ether. We've all done that. So thank you very much indeed for explaining that. Everyone happy to move on? Brilliant. 224607 to approve the change for the scheduled Personnel Finance Committee meeting, October to September. The thinking on this being to link up with a sort of more regular appraisal system for the staff, which is coming up next.
And also on holiday.
I was going to try and give that a more exciting reason.
Well, I just thought,
Basically, it's because of what.
It's because I'm on holiday.
Yeah, holidays. So I'm happy. It's the 13th, I think, of September,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
we're down as a finance meeting already. So put the personnel.
It'll bring the personnel bit forward. And potentially, I'm not quite sure, because we could still have the finance meeting. However, I think the estates committee may want a little bit of time into that September meeting to work out exactly what they're doing with their 5-year plan.
Rolling plan.
So that can then be brought to the November meeting, because that predominantly is most of the budget.
Seems fine. David?
I give my apologies on the basis that you've now brought it forward into my holiday.
So what are we talking about?
The 13th of September, which is where there's an existing finance committee meeting in the calendar, rather than being October.
Yeah.
Because the personnel and finance committee have different personnel. That's one thing, so different people are affected. Okay, where's on personnel? I'm on personnel.
Chair.
Yeah, Paul, yeah.
It's head of estates. The other's head of estates.
Paul.
No. Rupert Val. David.
Joe thinks he is.
Might still be on there still.
I'm having difficulty hearing. Normally you project your voice quite well.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll take.
Being a school teacher.
Well, maybe. 13th September is the date we're looking at. It does. Projected to the Horticultural Society satisfaction over the months. So, Do we need to vote on this, or are we happy to murmur our consent?
If you're all
Everyone okay with
that's
that?
fine.
David's on holiday, so. Lovely, thank you very much indeed. And then 244608, approve the appraisal policy. This is something that's been around probably since last year, I suppose. And Emma's put together a more modern version of appraisal. The idea being, apart from anything else, it's a bit more reflective. And rather than just being a one event each year with sort of slightly more inspiring overtones of how it's going, it's a sort of continual process, a conversation, dare I say it, which I think is much more common around the place. Any questions or queries or thoughts on it?
I mean, it sort of happens at the moment, but it's not really formalised. It's just formalising that.
And the nice idea is that by giving the staff the chance to talk about their objectives and refreshing them every 3 months, they're also able to say, well, there's one I've done well, I did that well, rather than that thing where we all tend to forget what we did 9 months ago rather than what we did last month.
And it's also more of a chance of getting 360-degree feedback back from the employees.
On a regular basis. Paul, is that a pen or is it a?
No, it's a pen.
That's just pen.
No, it's me.
That's okay. Couple of.
No, I was going to say.
Go for it.
Yeah, I like it. Because I do appraisal work, but normally no surprises in appraisal, are there? So, because otherwise I'd be done with the normal one. So I thought it was really nice. Sometimes they get extended to talk about the way that, I know we're not perhaps not as big to do that now, but how people live the values of the organisation, examples, things like that. And I thought it was really good. As long as if they say they want training and development, we actually give them training and development.
And there's a budgetary issue on that as well, which we can link up by November. The other nice point is towards, in the little programme at the bottom there in September, it talks about ingraining objectives, including group ones. So there might be lots of people think we'd all like to see, which firms that idea of what we as a council stand for. The only thing I was going to talk about maybe was the top of the second page. Talks about things being changed in the job description. It's saying second line down, going through with the employer to remove any activities that are out of date. Just thought we maybe change it to agree to remove. So it's both sides agree to remove.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a case of them going through their job description. And obviously, if there's a thing in there that they have not done for 12 months and don't see themselves ever doing, for whatever reason, it's maybe something that we don't do anymore, or then it's those sorts of things,
And the paragraph below that, third line down, it talks about the scope of the interview. Is it worth just changing that to meeting, make it a little bit less formal?
Yeah. I tried to change most of that, but obviously there's a couple of those. So again, do we need to formally approve that as its a policy? Yeah, I'm happy to propose that we make that change. Secondly, are we all okay with that? Lovely, thank you very much indeed. 224701 to approve bank reconciliation balance sheet budget. 87,000 in the sort of active account and 500,000 in the instant access savings account, which is nice. Any questions or queries on the bank reconciliation balance sheet, etc., etc.? No, fantastic. I looked through it, it all looks fine. I'm happy to propose that we approve that. Someone willing to second it? Jerry, thank you very much. Are we all okay to approve those? Yes, we had £100 worth of interest
I saw that,
on
yes.
the
105, wasn't it? I think?
the money that's been moved over to the savings account.
So next council meeting we can work out how to spend it.
But it looks like that's roughly what we'll get each month. But obviously, as Paul takes money out for us to use it, it'll come down a bit. But that's, first lot of reasonable interest we've had for quite some time.
Payments for June 2022, proposal being that the schedule of payments as presented are paid, etc. Checks are signed, which sounds exciting. Again, any questions or queries on any of those payments? I'm happy to propose that we go with that. Anyone willing to second it? Paul, thank you very much indeed. Are we all okay that we make our payments? Yep. Thank you. Do that later. 224703 to approve the quote for Christmas lights and extending the light along West Street. This is £17,000 hard-earned money, but the Christmas lights are lovely and popular. I couldn't work out how much we paid for them last year.
It's about 15, but what was happening now is this quote, because we've talked about it previous years, is to extend it all the way down to the clock shop. So you've got the strings going all the way down and then the motif at the end. So that's slightly inflated cost.
We know people like them. We know covering West Street is great. We know they're a good company. They do what they've done for the last 2 years.
I mean, the company that we were using before were probably about £10,000 more than this.
You get what you pay for. Wow, not.
And that was when we got our own lights, and they would come and put them up, and then obviously tell us how many needed replacing. This scheme is we only hire them, but you can change it. So
And
we can
driving down West Street and into the marketplace at Christmas is glorious.
People
And
come
for the
from
market.
miles.
Yeah, they're really nice. So I'm happy to propose that we approve the quote. If anyone's willing to second it, David, and then everyone in favour. Anyone against? No, lovely. Thank you very much.
Can I just ask that we make a nice big splash in the run up to Christmas about our new improved lights?
Yeah.
So we get even more people coming visitors. That's what Jessa rightly says.
We can get love out all over it. Fantastic. Social media. 224704. I even started looking up definitions of retrospective approval. We're giving permission in the future for something that's happened in the past.
Yeah.
But it's to give ourselves permission in September to look back at the payments.
Yeah, we did it last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I sat there going, is it the right word? And it's the right word. But yeah, we're effectively saying that we will give approval in the future for something that will then be in the past, but it's now in the future. I hope that clears it all up. I'm happy to agree to that because it makes sense.
Alice in Wonderland.
I hope so. Any queries, questions, concerns thereon?
Really an observation, if it saves us having to have a special meeting in August just for the purposes of ratifying a few accounts. So
And there are
it's a
still
great idea.
There are still verification counsellors and we still have to do the magic thing. So if there's any large £100 sums from the interest going on in place, we can stop it.
Yeah.
Do we need to formally agree that, or again, are we happy?
Yeah.
I'm happy to propose that we give retrospective approval. David happened to second it. Are we all in favour thereof? That's it. You don't know what you're agreeing to.
You don't want an August meeting, Brett.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
hooray. 224801 to receive an update from the Transport Study Working Party and consider the content of the report. It's really just considering the content of the report, isn't it? I think the only thing saying this is not whatever we agree to having in the report. It's not our stated policy. They're just suggestions, and Highways are the only people that can actually make any of these things happen. So it's a talking point really above anything else. Paul, do you want to say anything?
I've got a bit confused. So is it completely finished?
No, but they only want to have one more hit at it.
Yeah. So we're actually not the iteration I've got,
Mm-hmm.
the one that you presented at the town meeting,
Mm-hmm.
is still not the final.
Oh, I didn't realise that. I thought it was. Sorry.
No, well, it's still the draft, but they haven't got any numbers in it yet.
They've got the survey data to go in.
And they were waiting to see if they could do something with that data to work out the weights of trucks more. And because of it's going to take a lot more time, a month or so ago, he said that he wanted only to do more shots of it. So we can add anything that we want, tweak anything. At the moment, these are their suggestions. And some of them might be pie in the sky, some of them might be entirely predictable, but all we can do is use the information in here and talk to Highways about it. We discussed this a bit at the OBA meeting the other week and talked about the fact that this draft is something, people have a look at it again, they like the ideas, but until Highways come and see what they can do, until they find the money to do it, it's all vaguely irrelevant to an extent, but the data is what shows what's going on. And it's a big update on the data that they're using, which is from 2010, before Waitrose, before lots of houses are built, etc. So it's ideas going forward. policy to definite policy, because unless we have lots of interest coming in, we don't have the money to make these changes ourselves, nor do we have the authority. David?
I want to just check, because obviously there was a transport study which accompanied the planning application for Cotterstock Road, St Peters Road. There was another one for St Christopher's Drive. There is another one for the application that's before us again next month for Stoke Hill Road. Have TPP got copies of each of those?
They've been given access
Yeah.
online, yeah, and they've talked about them in some of them.
Yeah,
But a lot of those
I'd rather
studies,
lost track of where we were.
yeah, a lot of those studies made use of the data from 2010 to talk about junctions around the town.
Exactly.
So the Cotterstock Road site, they put one monitoring point on St Peters Road or New Road, I think, and then said that extrapolation to the start from 2010 shows everything's fine. So the idea was to get some fresh figures. To give the highways. I don't know whether you want to go through all of the various options or whether just broadly happy with. I'm happy to go down a quick list of what they are and see what people think about them. I know we're time pressed. So just quickly in the order, I've scribbled them down on this sheet over here.
I would say I think if we're going to do that, we ought to do it properly at some point. Not now.
Yeah, we've spent £15,000 or whatever it is on this report. I
Okay.
don't think it is something that should be done under time pressure.
I'm okay.
We could have a meeting in
But on the
August to
other hand,
discuss it.
you've sent it round and we've all had an opportunity to, well, I put my comments on.
No, absolutely. People have got their comments on.
Why don't we meet as a subgroup
Mhm.
and amalgamate all the comments that have come in and consider it in a little bit more detail, and then formally lift out bits to put back towards full council. I think we're right. I mean, we've worked with them before. But Liz is right. We don't want to rush something like this because it will inform lots of different things in the next 10 years.
I think so. It's not something critical.
Oh no.
Yeah, the only thing we need to make sure is that it doesn't fall off the table
Yeah,
altogether.
Yeah.
Oh no.
The nice thing at the moment as well is that if we ever get a meeting with highways and wander around looking at all the ideas, we can talk about the draft project and they can do that. At the moment, there's no stats in it. But until they say, well, we'll look at that if we have the stats, there is a very time issue. So in a way, the draft report is what we need at the moment.
Well, I'll take an action then to set we'll have a physical meeting if we can.
Right.
Of the small group. I'll speak to Mike as well, talk about the data. See if we can expedite it a bit over the summer period.
Excellent, Brett.
Because you're right, there's no rush particularly.
The only thing I wanted to add, and I feel quite strongly about some of the elements that have come out of this, but there seems to be a bit of a disconnect with regards to external transport. So things like the bus scheduling.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really go into the considerations of the services we have in Amble Town and how our community is served and where it needs to go. For example, the healthcare having lost quite a lot of services, the dentistry being completely full. It mentions the fact that we have these elements, but doesn't actually go into depth with that, which I don't know if that's because it's more than the report or it's missing from the report, but I was quite surprised that it didn't take that into consideration.
Just quickly to answer that, so they do that. They do look at bus scheduling. Well, they did in 2010. It depends on the influence you can have over the scheduling, but you are right. But I think we probably have to think a bit more radically different than explores and stuff like that into the future, because I'm not sure that is going to be the
No,
and
it's
you know what I mean. Though it's that thinking that we need
absolutely
rather than answer, to think about it. They'll help us do that.
Mhm.
But if we take those commentary, so everyone's had a chance to have a commentary, meet up as a subgroup.
Mm-hmm.
Put something together that's a bit more user-friendly without losing any of its impact, and then have a proper discussion at full council.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think the other thing with the buses is it's, as people around the room know, Stagecoach, they're a private company, they do what they want. And while Northampton, again, it comes back to highways, doesn't it? They hopefully are looking towards suggesting stuff. They've just started new services in Catherine with a little Call Connect type thing. And we've got all the Section 106 money going into Northampton's coffers for the buses from all the building work. This is a good time for us to start maybe directing how they
And
spend
totally, but for me, I also think there's an element, if we're trying to keep people from driving, we should be able to provide basic services in town. They've just moved all of the maternity services to Corby, so you can't even get a maternity appointment here, you can't get bloods taken here, which for us,
Diabetic eye screenings, everything, so much. has
and I
moved.
just think
People
that
having to
has,
pay so much money.
yeah, and it has to be brought to be connected in that respect. The nurseries going, that again makes people drive to Barnwell, to outside villages, which
The other side of that coin is that there's more and more housing.
and totally, but again, there has to be joined up thinking with it. But I agree, there needs to be a much wider conversation.
But that's what this could be a tool for us to have those conversations with the people who can make decisions.
It doesn't need, sorry, but you're right, the connected thinking is pretty average. At the moment.
Average is generous.
Yeah, to me, because you do have these sort of contradictions. You have a growing population that you remove NHS services, yet they've never been so busy. And in fact they're building in new clinical space in there as we speak, aren't they? And you've got hospitals that are rammed full, no services, no preschool, dentistry, all got some really nice places to go and eat, and culturally we're very with infrastructure services, probably not.
Well, and the X4 used to be brilliant to get to Peterborough Hospital, but Peterborough Hospital has moved, and it's now no longer on the X4 route. So it's all of those kind of
I'll take
considerations.
that. I'll take that.
Right, we shall come back to that. But again, it's a good tool. Thank you for reading through it. It's quite dense. But the more paperwork we have, the more planners, etc. like paperwork. 224802, to receive information regarding issues with trees. These are the 2 trees on the marketplace that people are sitting under at the moment, having lots of lovely shade. And I always want to take them out potentially due to the problems with York stone. And it's that interesting thing of we like the trees, but we like the stone. We maybe can't have both, but there we go. No.
But we're only getting concrete filling any gaps.
Yeah.
That's
hard.
tragic after all that money that was spent on York stones.
They don't use York stone, and also partly because I think the expense and trying to get hold of it, but also it's not level on the base, so it causes problems. So as these problems are occurring, they are replacing the tar.
I think we've got to get rid of the trees, unfortunately.
They're nice trees. Well, they're okay trees.
Well, because it's the uneven surface that we're left with, whatever we do. And however much we...
The interesting thing is if we start taking trees out and redoing the whole surface, that's sort of half the transport study proposals for marketplace being suggested. So maybe that's where the joined up thinking comes. We talked to Northampton about solving all the problems in one area, but it probably won't be that.
It is a bit. I was wanting to walk around the other day up there, and it is a trip issue. It's not. It's starting to look a bit unsightly as well.
People have tripped on it, and that's why they've had to remove them. Because people are tripping.
Well, if some of the trees are not.
When-
I know trees are trees, aren't they? But I mean, to me, I'd rather have a really nice landscape marketplace, but we'd lose some of the Christmas tree hanging.
Yeah, I know. That's the only
Apparatus.
problem.
The original tree risk assessment we had done, didn't it, talked about replacing them. And there are other trees that are better at putting roots further down and not going out. I'm not sure what they are though. But whether they then ruins things, pipework and stuff rather than stones, I don't know which is worth. The other thing I was looking at somewhere else is a lot of places in London put rubber crumb around the trees. So effectively it's a flexible surface, and then you put the stone further beyond that. Is that something Highways mentioned or?
They didn't mention that. I don't know.
Last time we got that sort of thing was when the beach was built outside Tesco's. Sand, do you remember, was that in your time? It was ghastly, it just went everywhere, do you remember? When they redid the
Yeah.
marketplace, and there were
Cars.
bicycle parking spaces and things outside of Tesco's. And the surface was sand, and it just blew everywhere all the time.
Not our finest hour.
It was christened the beach.
On my
So we've been down that route, the sort of thumb route.
Wow, rubber crumb. 22, in the mayor's report, Charlie Best and I walked up and down Clapham Road on Friday morning with Sarah Barnwell from Highways talking about trips and holes and Lord knows what else. And the big thing she was talking about is the Highways budget is apparently being cut again. And therefore they basically respond to trips and falls, etc.
So we've got to encourage people to go out and trip.
Yeah.
Or in different
Yeah.
places though. We
No,
try.
we just encourage people to report that they.
Yeah, it's
You
the
don't actually
reporting.
want them to trip,
There
but it's
are
your
actually
duty to report your trip.
In terms of Highways thought, are they looking for us to help solve it, or are they just going to tell us what's happening?
I think
How's
they're
it work?
looking, I don't think, they want to take the trees out. Even though they've had the report done, and I think one of them needs to be looked at annually and the other one isn't too bad. But they just don't see this problem going away, and we're just going to get more patches of tarmac.
So I suppose
But if they can take them out and then level it, I don't know what sort of stone. That they're gonna use.
They're not going to put York stone.
Yeah, on the other side, on the
Yeah,
pavement, on the other side, it's got a similar looking stone, but it's not York stone. He did say what that was, but I don't know. I mean, they just wanted us to me to bring this to you to see whether you would be in agreement with those trees being removed.
I personally wouldn't. I think we need to pull trees out. It's the very last resort. But that's just my thinking. And again, seeing lots of people sitting under them for the last few days, I think they're useful. Is it worth sending that report to Charlie Best? Just ask him, because he's on a footpath campaign. Seeing if he's got any thoughts, maybe talk to Highways as well. Just to see what's what, maybe broadly.
Before we make any decision?
Well, are we being asked to make a decision?
Well, all we've been asked is the request is, would we be okay with them being removed?
Can they override us anyway?
Well, I'm just wondering that.
They're their trees.
I don't think they want to.
No, I understand.
But they'll have to look at, what they have to keep doing. And
I think we should agree to them being removed, but take the lead, if you like, put ourselves in charge and come up with what we want in their place, rather than them just taking it out of our hands, taking the trees away and tarmacking over it, because that's the easiest and cheapest option. I think we should be saying we want flagstones again in the place.
yeah, I don't think it'd be York stone.
Might not be,
But,
but at least it'd be better than
Yeah,
tarmac patches.
I mean, maybe.
You know, if we go in with what we want in for taking them out.
Jeremy?
That's probably a bit low now, but I've noticed certainly at the weekends a lot of motorcycles and things like that actually park there. If we're going to change things, then that can't be helping.
No problem.
Yeah, we need some sort of way of not letting motorcycles park there. That's a sign, I don't know why, but yeah.
Dan?
Is the primary issue of highways with York Stone the cost? Because if it was, would they agree to us funding it?
It's not a stone that they like to use because of how uneven it is underneath, and there's movement anyway with it. That is what he told me.
My understanding is that there is a store of York stones somewhat, mind you, might not be in Northampton now, might it? It's probably in Northampton, in Ainsworth Street.
Yeah.
Isn't Marketplace listed? Would there be something about that?
Resident conservation.
It's in the conservation area.
What a good idea. Sort it out and list it.
I don't think it can be.
Why do this wall?
Don't see why not, yeah.
We don't own the market.
No, well,
Who
we
does
have the
own it?
market rights, so we have the rights to the market. We need to be careful about that because that may impact on our markets and what we want to do on there before we go running off to list it.
But who actually owns the land under it? Is it Highways?
Yes, highways. Yeah.
I would say I'm not happy with them removing trees, but if they do, they should be replaced with trees. I
Trees that don't.
You know, the last 2 days have shown us something, shade's going to be important, and we've become like an oven.
Oh, sorry.
The resin bound, I don't know if that works with trees, but if you're not replacing with stone, the resin bound stone is nice.
Is it possible to go back to Highways maybe and say, what would they replace the trees with? I'm sure the answer would be nothing. But I think.
Yeah,
there'll
well,
be
we
as
did
much
talk
effort.
about that, about whether they could be replaced with a different type of tree. I mean, I don't know. My view is that if one tree's caused problems, I know it probably won't cause problems maybe in our lifetime, but there you are, just
They haven't been
replace
there
it.
all that long, you know.
Yeah.
Have they?
I couldn't tell you
25
when.
years,
Whether you could have something else, whether you could have some
What's
other
it
form of
like?
shade.
less 20 years or something. So they've been.
And that you'll get parasols, won't you, from the cafe? Presumably
Yeah.
that'd be why
Yeah.
remove the trees.
I mean, maybe
Yeah, would you be happy with that?
the cafe might want them removing because they must be constantly cleaning their tables and chairs.
So, we don't really have a consensus.
I think it's about it to be removing trees
I would agree.
at this stage. Of the
So is it
world.
worth maybe going back to see if they know there's, because there are meant to be road-friendly trees, plain trees, I think. Maybe.
I could say that, but I can also go back and say, no, we don't need to remove the trees, so they've got to come up with something
Or
else.
maybe it's, we don't want to remove them until they come up with a better suggestion. It involves
Trees.
York stone and more and trees
And shade.
shade and see what they come up with.
Yeah.
And maybe copy Charlie and just see.
That's it. At the moment, A, it looks atrocious. B, it's not a walking space. And they don't, the York stone issue is also because they're not good in frost and poor weather conditions. So I think there should be decorative flags or whatever, and not just tarmac. But to me, you know, we can't just lose sight of everything's got to be.
Let's see what Highways suggest, because they'll know what their budget is. Now they've got KWSP are ending on the something in September, being replaced by Kia, who are now doing Northern-Hants Highways contract. They'll have a clearer idea of what their contract is. I don't think anyone's seen it publicly, and they'll be able to tell us whether this is part of their remit to beautify and improve. Hopefully, also, we mentioned this in our response to the consultation about consultations with the Levelling Up Fund, and we mentioned the marketplace in that, and maybe they're going to come up and say, one of the questions is, do you want lots of money to redo the marketplace? And we'll say, yes, please. We've got the plan, we've got the ideas. Who knows? 224803, notification of intention to add a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit to Barnwell Road.
I didn't understand this at all. This is to increase the speed limit from 30 to
The
40.
moment-
No, it's the next bit.
No, it's not.
No,
There's a drawing.
there's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit that starts way beyond the parkway. And I think it's to Barnwell Country Park. I think it's to make the first section 40 rather than 30, and then the next section 30. And
I don't think it's, if you look at the drawing, I think the existing 30-mile-an-hour zone runs right to the end where the 40-mile-an-hour is that they're proposing. So they're actually increasing the speed limit once you go over the knee, over the bridge. It is at them, honestly. It's currently 30 mile an hour past Barnwell Country Park entrance.
Yeah.
Yes,
Is it January?
That's to
Yeah,
remain,
and I-
that remains.
Yeah.
So the 30 mile an hour remains, and then the new,
no, what Jerry's saying is
It's
that the 30
40.
month, what they're doing is replacing that green section is 30 at the moment.
That
and
green
they're
section is
making
30
it 40.
Is it?
40, yeah. You haven't got to park yet.
Because it is 30. I know from speed watching there that no one
There's the park entrance.
does 30 on the way in. And
That's the river. That's
I've gone through there at more than 30.
That's the pumping station.
You do.
On my
There are
bike.
lots
On my
of
bike.
But on your
Oh.
But I just think-
So they're increasing it, which I can't understand. I mean, most
Nice.
people drive down there at 40 anyway, so they'll be driving down there at 50 past the Country Park entrance if it's a 40 zone.
I think the psychology of it is that if you come out of a 60 into a 30 and you're not expecting it because there's no built-up area, actually a 40 then a 30 makes you slow down more.
Well, why not put the 40 beyond the 30 where it
I would,
is?
yeah, I mean, I just, I just really misread
And the
that.
other thing is, why on earth did they come up with this plan, which is a relatively straight, open and wide piece of road, which has very few accidents on it? What about Stoke Doyle Road? I understand to Stoke Doyle. What about the Coast Junction, where we've had several fatal accidents? You know,
Quick question, do we know where this has come from?
I think if it's like other things like double yellow lines, people can put in requests. There's a period of time where you put in requests for various different things.
Okay.
So whether this was one that was put in. But no, I completely misread that. I thought really good. They extended it right out
No,
past.
savings research. David?
Well, one of the primary users of the country park are relatively small children.
Mhm.
And having walked my small grandson up that road from West Street where they live, up to the country park, the thought of cars going past there at an increased speed is very worrying, and I think we should be opposing this. And as Councillor Hutton says, I think any of us around this table could probably come up with half a dozen better locations to start playing around with speed limits than that one. But yeah, I cannot see the logic of it, and I would ask that we oppose it.
Quick question, Emma. This is not in Amble, is it? So,
It's in Barnwell
Barnwell.
Parish.
No,
So-
but we could.
I know, so we can still say we oppose it,
Yeah.
but they'll say it's, because it's just received notifications.
Mm.
So, I think, I suspect there's probably some psychology behind step speed limits. But I think the idea of the reason it was put in the first place, as you say, is children and country park
Yeah.
users,
there's a
etc.
huge number
But
of
that hasn't
pedestrians
changed.
walked up
Yeah,
and down
yeah.
that road to the country park.
And it's a
Every day of
skinny
the week,
road.
particularly at weekends.
So it's our general view that we're not fans. We'd like to tell highways we're not fans.
Yeah, I think
They
we should.
can ignore us and
Yeah.
crack on.
Yeah.
Well, at least that way, if it happens, we can then point out we were opposed to it. And can we notify Barnwell that that's what we've done? As it does relate to
And-
that.
And I think it's worth asking the question as well, why are they proposing this when there are lots more roads we highlighted being significantly more dangerous, and where there's a history of accidents on them?
But we don't know the methodology of it, it's just come as an
They put
education.
those lines down, true velo lines down, which record the speed at which the lines have been crossed. And we had the same thing going across Station Road and the bridge there, and where we had 30 miles an hour going one way and 40 miles an hour over the same stretch, going the opposite way. And that went on for years and years. And then they did this exercise with the Trevelo lines and discovered that there was an average speed at which everybody went, regardless of what the sign told them to go at. And that guides exactly that situation.
Well, that's certainly, it's only.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Most people are not fast and should.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got till the end of July to get that into them and
Yeah.
they can do what they want. But again, if we can make the point that
I thought it was a really good idea.
well, it is just
Well,
not.
Liz and I had a conversation about what a good idea.
2249.
Now you know why.
To receive the minutes of the planning committee. David, do you want to say anything about anything? Yeah.
I think the minutes actually are pretty self-explanatory. So unless anybody has anything in particular, the only thing I would sort of add is that I noticed that the next item is the paper that Councillor Ryholt produced, and he's had to give us apologies.
Mhm.
As soon as that came out, I indicated that because it had missed the agenda for the planning meeting, that I would mention it and suggest that actually thinking about the things he says in there
Mhm.
probably sits better within the planning committee brief than full council. So my suggestion would be, that rather combining the two items, is that we consider as full council, letting planning look at it next month. It can then report back to full council, and full council can take a view at that stage.
That seems reasonable. So Councillor Records report is basically discussing
Well,
us
the various
suggesting to Northwood
sort of
Terraces.
observations he makes on what happened, but also some thoughts about perhaps future directions on certain things. And just to mention when the agenda comes out for the August planning meeting, the third iteration of the Stokedale Road planning application is before us. Again, I'd invite all councillors to attend. There are certainly transport/highways issues with regard to that application, which I know you've explored at length. But actually the thing that worries me the most is the changes that have been proposed to the cemetery extension, which alter its location for one thing, and I'm not convinced that it hasn't effectively reduced the area of the extension, and therefore the fact that we thought we'd get 50 years worth out of it, and I rather think we're going to get less out of what is now being proposed. So it will be an opportunity to discuss that and feedback it to MNC.
So that's the 2nd of August planning meeting.
If that's the first Tuesday.
That is the first Tuesday. So if we can all get our thoughts together with that. Just talking the cemetery, there's lots of good work going down there at the moment, but we're not finding lots of empty plots, unfortunately. So our space is going to be limited, and at some point we will run out. So yeah, that's of some importance. Okay, so yeah, that'll go back to planning, and we'll see it again in September. Thank you very much. 224903, receive an update from correspondence with Vistry Homes regarding construction traffic in the centre of Oundle, so exciting emails to and fro. Any questions or queries or thoughts on trucks in town, etc.?
I didn't notice more myself.
There have been a lot more.
I don't think it's because of distortion of the way my brain works. You've been thinking about it more.
No, they've all been lots of them through town. Vistry have now got a manager on site. He started this week, and there are a lot more signs, and the trucks on site are moving more slowly. And he is very clear. I chatted with him last week as a resident. He's very clear that what they said they're going to do in the construction management plan is what they're going to do. I made the point that that's what they've done for the last 2.5 months. And certainly with what's going to be happening on St. Christopher's Drive in the next few months, it's really important that we try and, I suppose, show that we're keeping aware of these things, because the big wagons going through town are problematic, but going down East Road, they're going to be doubly problematic if they're not doing what they say they're doing. But Vistry assure us everything's wonderful, so that's good. We'll see, I suppose. I've got most of them, not always a video of. So, Paul, do you want to take us through anything? Or
Well, I became chair.
you got taken
That was
through.
a high point for
Congratulations.
me in the evening, I thought. Jamie became my deputy.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, it was a fairly short but concise meeting. So there's things to do, particularly with because some of you did the walk around that meeting, didn't you? So unfortunately, I made a complete hash of my diary for a whole week. So me and Jamie are going to finish that off. So my idea from that is, because I got a note from Liz as well, but got this idea of a rolling maintenance thing for property. So I want to disaggregate everything and start back and look at the whole portfolio as a whole portfolio. Instead of, being perhaps a bit more strategic in what we do and what we focus on each year, whilst maintaining our need to maintain things as and when they're required to be maintained. So I'm happy to do that bit of work with Lisa. I think we've also got the cows in as well, haven't we?
Cows are in.
That is a job well done, because I don't know how many times we tried to do that. You've done it.
It took a while.
So it's Carthy face, isn't it?
Carthy McNorman.
So we've actually lost in the grass when I went
Yeah.
back.
They are destroying the grass myrtles as they go.
Yeah.
Right.
I completely messed up my diary and missed the talk completely. So if you are rearranging or doing anything.
Yeah, we're going to do a walk round probably.
Okay.
Whenever you want, yeah.
Yeah, I am away for quite a bit of August, but
Yeah.
we can talk about that.
And we had a bit of good news about James Strong, the EPC assessment.
Yeah.
So that was a gift from heaven, wasn't it? So yeah, it was a good meeting, and we'll push the agenda on now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. David?
One difficulty of reading the minutes of the Estates Management Committee is that almost every heading says see report, which of course the committee have seen, but the reader of the minute hasn't. Now the trouble is, I rather suspect that that might mean that there are an awful lot of papers. But I do wonder actually whether there is any merit in putting together those papers and emailing them out to all
I
councillors.
think they're all put together and sent to you, so,
But they're not sent
Maybe
to
when-
everybody.
No,
because
they're
I
only
sent
sent to
it
the
to
states.
Sydney.
yeah. I mean, there is a lot of in-depth stuff that you wouldn't necessarily need to see.
There is, but what's good is that there's normally one concise report.
I'm just thinking
90%
about
of
the
it.
report,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
90% of the agenda sits on one paper. So that could probably be circulated.
Yeah.
Perhaps the chair could, sorry to immediately increase your workload, so don't walk away
Well,
from
I'll
it
go through
because
the
I'm
office.
suggesting it. But, I mean, if there is a particular report that you think would be useful to all councillors to read in conjunction with the minutes, could you perhaps
Well,
arrange for it to be circulated?
I think my view is it wouldn't add any extra work to the office because Lisa
Report
writes it
to-
anyway.
I'll just ask her when she sends me the
And as
minutes.
it might as well go
Just send me
to,
that one.
to everyone. 90% of our work is through our estates anyway. So.
I think it's worth putting that report on the draft minutes that come to this meeting, because I think if she sends it to everybody,
Yeah, let's do that.
before your estates meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure some of you might read it, but some of you might think, well, I'm not going to that.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's attached
Yeah.
to this,
Oh, that really was my thinking,
Yeah.
so yes.
Because otherwise you'll never keep up with all the intricacies. The other thing I forgot to say, though, I didn't formally thank Liz for her role as significant chair, because of course Alton Davis wasn't around too much for one reason or another, but also Paul was chair last year. So.
Yeah. And just on that, congratulations to Luke, deputy chair of the planning and all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
fantastic. Young generation coming through. No pressure, no pressure. Keeping them finances. 225002 to receive the hub manager report, consider ideas for events and community group meetings in the hub for approval. Any thoughts, considerations? I haven't looked up what fake door testing was. Any thoughts? Probably everyone else does that. It's probably being a historian.
just to say that the youth club is really keen. We've got somebody that's really keen to start a youth club. Originally, you were talking about the hub space, and although that might work to a point, I think it will have an impact on ballet if it's in here, because a youth club is not going to be a quiet club. You're going to have kids in here making noise because that's what they're here for. So, although it may, if you're happy for it to start, we may just trial it and see what happens. But then it may be that it might have to move to a room upstairs to start with, platform room. But then potentially, once you've had a look at the space down there, that might work really well for a youth club, maybe a mums and tots in the day. You could probably have a multi-club.
So what's the sort of timescale when the youth club started?
Well,
'Cause that's a group
they'd
we don't
keen to
really.
start in September, but I have talked to Morag about this and said we can't. I said we could perhaps see, if you're happy for us to see how a youth club of an evening works in here, along with ballet, then we could trial it. But if it just seems like it's just not going to work, and we might have to look about somewhere else, or once we've had a look in the preschool and it's been cleared out and we can see I think there will need to be some changes if you were going to make that a permanent room for youth club, because I mean the toilet facilities are made for preschool children. They're not made for
That's fine.
Youths.
15 and 16-year-olds.
So is that something your states could look at?
But that's what I
Yeah.
just, when you have a look, and I mean, there's a little bit of outside space that's concreted. There's also a grassed area. I mean, could be a really lovely space for a lot of different things, and maybe a youth club being one of them.
Cool. We'll have a look at that next week. That makes sense. Anything else?
What do you think about a youth club
I think youth clubs-
starting here?
We as a council probably don't support the young people in town as well as we probably could. So the youth club here makes complete sense, I suspect. How we do it and where we do it and the long-term implications is probably something we need to think about.
Yeah.
Have they got any? Well, not business case, but
They've got
details of what they're
already,
planning.
the lady that's going to organise it, and Morex helped her with this. Morex helped her for the first year, and she's also, pointing this lady into directions of what she should be looking at. And we're going to obviously help with promoting it. The lady's got all of the sort of DBS and safeguarding people to hand, that sort of thing. So they're covering all of that, and they are literally just hiring the space. So it's not on our shoulders, but we're sort of going to try and support it.
It's not, well, it is quite a few years ago now, but former councillors Buckle and Buckle were involved in running a youth club in the town, and as councillors as well, there was a certain interchange, if you like, between the council and the then youth club, which survived for a certain period of time, but like all of these things, it's cyclical, and it eventually didn't survive. But it may just be worth looking back over some of the stuff. I know it's years ago, but sometimes it's not worth reinventing the wheel. There may be information out there from previous years that we could tap into.
When we're buckling around.
That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to remember. I'm looking at Councillor Chester.
Well, I'm thinking, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh dear, that might mean it's longer ago than I thought it was.
There was
There was a youth club here. The big problem was they do require things like storage. They always have stuff. And noise next door to a whole lot of old people's bungalows and the members spreading out. Those are the things that probably won't be written about in any kind of records.
Yeah, right.
But that's really the problem. They got out of hand, didn't they?
They have.
And it had been in the Victoria Hall, and we moved it here because it got out of hand in the Victoria Hall. I'm not saying it's going to get out of hand. What I'm saying is that it's not like a nice little group of people sat in one room drinking coffee and being nice to each other.
Youth of today.
That's what we used to have in our hometown. We had, but it was a youth cafe, and so you'd
And
there
there
would
is
be
a
a pool
youth cafe,
table,
yes.
but it was never an evening.
I'm not saying I'm not against it at all.
So
I'm just saying it's a lot more complicated than you think.
is a proposal to hire a space from us?
Yeah, but is it worth, because like you say, now we're talking about storage, is it worth waiting until you've had a look at the preschool space? Estates have looked at that to consider it for whatever reason or whatever ideas, and then we look at.
I think absolutely, but I think the other thing is if they're looking to start September, states will report back to the next full council meeting at the end of September, by which time it's October, by which anything can happen. So
I
well,
mean,
it's just worth-
I don't think they have anywhere else that they're going to go.
No. I just wondering if it's worth us getting sight of some information from them before then, if they have any idea of, I don't know, finances or anything like that.
It's not as if we need to issue them a lease.
No,
They're just
not
coming
hiring.
in under
No,
our
that's fine.
normal hiring agreement, and if they choose to use the hub, they choose to use the hub. They choose to use a room upstairs. They choose to use a room upstairs. Provided they can provide us with the necessary insurance, and we already actually know they've got the funding to cover the rent.
Yeah.
Well, just to know some
Just
terms.
get it going.
No, I'm not going to be difficult.
No.
But what's the hire rate on that route?
Well, no, we haven't got it, but I'm not
This is
hiring
a
that room
lease.
at the moment.
Okay.
We know we've got a higher
We would
rate on
need
the
to approve
hub, but
that
we've
change.
got a higher rate on the platform room if we
So
choose.
the platform rooms above.
Yeah,
the
but
back.
yeah, it may not work. I mean, I don't know, they're both very close.
So basically, we can't use that space for the youth club until we meet again in September, in essence.
Yeah, and I do think, I think it would be really good, but I think there's a bit of work needs to be done. before it's ready to give to anybody as a space.
So any other points on the hub report? Obviously, there's lots of stuff about the cafe.
The stuff about the cafe did give me pause for thought, in that I thought we'd been very clear that we're not reopening it as a cafe. So time being spent thinking about it reopening as a cafe, it's not time well spent in my opinion. But however, I've spoken to Marek many times and said I wouldn't object to there being the occasional drop-in cafe being advertised, but running a commercial cafe is something that we have ruled out in the short term.
What did Einstein say about definition of insanity?
The only reason she did, I had talked to her about this, and she said she felt that she should tell you because when she did the marketing down at the marketplace, when she'd spoken to other people, this is all she was getting all the time. So she felt that you should know that this is what a lot of people have said to her. When I say a lot, it's not thousands.
There's a strong group. Absolutely.
There's a strong group.
But there's
So
also,
she felt that you should know that.
you said on Facebook long enough, you're pretty aware of it. But I think also there's an equally large group who may not want to subsidise it to that extent. But that's something we can consider over the next few months. Is it worth more spending some time working out the costs? Because it's all very well saying people want a coffee cafe, but it's going to cost.
She started at that, and we've done all the costs when we did it before.
Yeah.
I just said there's no point at this moment in time because this is not the avenue that the council want to pursue. We want to try some other things first, and that's what we're doing. It was just she just wanted you to know that there were people out there saying.
Any other points or questions?
I just was really very pleased and impressed by what I read, to be honest. Considering, I only met my
On Sunday.
drinks on Sunday. I didn't come to last council meeting. I was able to make it. So the first time I met her, she seemed to have come absolutely storming into the
Oh
room.
yeah, I know. I have to keep raining.
Which is fantastic. I think
There was talk in the
So
estates
thanks.
minutes about getting her to come and talk to estates. Is that right, Demonstrate?
Yeah,
Is she coming next week or are we waiting until September?
I think it's probably best if we wait, because I think I agree with Jerry. I think what Jerry said is true. I think what he's trying to do is really good.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
It's just all about expectation management, really, and channeling that energy probably, and actually coming in September and talking to them about.
Yeah.
If you ask people a question about something that they really want, they'll tell you they really want it, and it doesn't mean to say that they're right or whether they're wrong, because it's divide opinion. To be fair.
She is organising or looking to organise in the middle of August an afternoon tea and inviting people from Stronglands,
Next week, I think.
people from Malting to be so, and Habit House as well. That's something that's going to happen in August.
I've scribbled down here, I think, that I was going to propose that for events like that, or any event that Morag wanted to organise, as a way of showing our support, we would need to say, she says that we bought the coffee machine, it's not suitable for a cafe. But in terms of us offering sort of financial backing to ideas, saying that if she's organising an event, are we okay with her being able to access the coffee machine for free for that event?
Yeah, but she's got a budget, a small amount of money, but we decided that when you're doing, when you're making tea and coffee for a large quantity of people, you're better off having a big kettle and so that's what we're going to do.
That's fine,
Yeah.
that's great. But no, things like that are exactly right. So there's a lot of people, Stronglands, would like something here, but it's a place to meet.
Yeah.
Whether it's a formal cafe or just a place to cup of tea, that's perfect.
It's every other
Excellent.
Wednesday.
We'll pass, we thank them for the Sunday, but pass that our thanks on them. Obviously, she can come and talk to us at the States in a few weeks' time, that would be great. 225003, close consideration how much money should be spent on further repairs to the wall around the churchyard following the recent request to close the doorway from the Gascoigne building into the churchyard. Obviously, there's some fairly big numbers on one of those quotes there. I had a chat with Amy, who's the title is now. She was the estates person. She's got a new title that's bigger and grandiose. About the issue, their general view is that it's a well-used area, and Amble School have propped the wall up for the last 10 years. And if Weldon Stone are okay with it being open, they're okay with it being open in the short term. At Weldon Stone, I met one of the guys down there by chance and had a chat with him. He says he's 90% sure it's okay. But the other point is that the water butts that hold it up have been there for 10 years and we've not done anything about it. And while the numbers here are pretty large, if it were to go, the numbers would be probably double, 30 or 40 or 50% more. So it seems, to me, it's something that we've got to bite the bullet on. But that's my thoughts. Any other thoughts around the room?
I think we also need to see what damage has been done behind that water and scaffolding, because that's been up there for a very long time
10 years.
without us knowing. And that could cause even more damage.
I cycle under that doorway a lot every day, and it's not getting, it's always been like that for a long time. It's not being made worse by that. But the thing is, business going back.
It's what's happening to that stone that's behind them. And if we take that off to have a look, is it going to cause a problem?
Any other thoughts? David, is that
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly significant part of the town, isn't it? And
absolutely.
unfortunately, we are the custodians of it. I'm afraid you're right. If we don't bite the bullet now, it's just going to cost us a lot more money later. So I think we are going to have to look very seriously and get whatever work that needs doing being done. And I was a bit alarmed at the thought that that was going to be closed, because it's an extremely well used gate, not only by members of the school but by members of the public as well.
No, it is.
We've had gates shut around the town though in other places, by other people.
Well, when I was there for 10, 15 minutes, about 25 people came through.
I agree. My only concern about it was it is a big fair chunk of capital.
Mhm.
And that means it's something we're not going to spend on something else as well. So if it's a safety issue, I think our conversation revolved around making sure there wasn't a safety issue in the first instance, and then sorting out what we're actually going to be in for if we do sort it out. So I mean, we are custodians, so we will have to get resolved, but it's a big chunk, when we're not spending money on other things. That's all. I think that was a
It
state.
certainly is, but it's not going to get a smaller chunk.
No.
I think the interesting story that Amy was telling me is that the reason the scaffolding up on the Adamson building at the moment is there's a stone coming off there, and the number for that's bigger than this. And recently something fell off the Great Hall, and the number for that was frighteningly larger than this. And that's the danger with stone. It's permanent, amazing, brilliant when it goes big. And even if we shut the gate and the wall were to go onto the road coming into the school property, then obviously it could be something damaging there too. So it's a matter of we've got to spend it at some point.
And if you close the door, will the door stay closed for 10 years? Nothing's done.
In 10 years. We obviously Weldon are on site at the moment, aren't they? But they're going to move off soon.
Yeah,
The
they
weather's
wouldn't be able to do
concerning
it. I'm sure when we had a conversation about it, I think they said.
Which will be better for Lyme, because it's too hot for Lyme at the moment. Presumably we need to make a decision.
Yeah.
I'm happy to propose that if people are okay, and no one's against it at the moment, I'm happy to propose that we approve the work going ahead. If anyone's willing to second it. Are we okay to vote on that?
And subject to the gate remaining closed until then, unless they want to provide us with a health and safety report, which we feel that we could be happy with.
Mhm.
I mean, you say members of the public use it, but really it's about allowing school access as it's onto their property. So if it's important to them and they'd like to provide us with some kind of recommendation whether there isn't any danger, then we could consider reopening it until such time as Worthingstone could do it.
So we're approving the expenditure and getting the work done, and as a caveat, we're also saying we'll shut the gate, and if they'd like us to reopen it, say September time when term starts, and any
The onus
mentions
is on them.
to say
To reassure
we're
us.
happy.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
And you're happy for that money to come out general reserves?
I think that has to
It's
be
the only
Well, yeah,
policy.
we've got, we have
unless,
no,
that, unless that interest starts tossing.
but I just have to ask you that.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah, it has to.
formally say that you're happy with that.
I'm happy.
If they want something different, they'd have to insure it.
Yeah.
Provide the insurance.
So do I need to say that again?
Things like-
So it comes out of general reserves, or we all have
Yeah.
that?
So we're asking Amber School to come back to us.
Advise them that we intend to keep the gate
Closed.
closed until such time as
Until the work is
Worthingstone can do the work which we have approved. If it's important to them that the gate is open for the start of the September term, the onus is on them to provide us with some kind of proof. Proof is the wrong word, I can't quite think of the right
But
word.
effectively, confirmation they're okay with it.
And yes,
They're willing to take the risk. Brilliant. And so that will come out of general reserves, we're okay with that?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Gotta be.
Anyone finds any money down the sofa in the meantime, just let us know. 225101, received the latest article from the advertiser, lots of cows all over the place, so thank you very much for that. 225201, thank you letters from our first responders, 2 of them, which is great, the Jubilee and everything else. Again, it's nice that Play and Heartside are now working hand in hand. And 225202, thank you from the Flushing Field Association, which is tough all work they did as well. 2253, any other relevant matters for report only? Let's just go around. Red, anything from you? Darren? Luke?
No.
David? Val?
This is, I'm not getting it, Councillor Arnold here, but I've noticed a lot of filth and litter around the co-op. And I think maybe
Val,
a
I'll
letter
have
from
you
us-
know
And
that
I've seen you picking up, so I'm
In the co-op or outside
and
the
the
co-op?
surroundings of the building.
I
Pavement.
honestly emptied one of those bins yesterday, and it was. Things like
But it is very
that.
dirty.
It was horrible.
Sorry.
We thought we went through the car park the other week in the Estates Walk, and it was some good mix. So obviously it's summer access. I think it's people buying stuff for summer and dumping it. So.
Yeah, there was quite nice wine bottle in there. And things like that. I don't know what
Quite
people
a
are
nice
doing.
wine.
Yeah,
Just a bottle.
Yeah, no, yeah.
It was nice.
Throw away food also means throw away packaging. That's the problem.
Liz?
Thank you.
Paul?
Can we organise a comms subgroup meeting, maybe at least once a year?
Yeah.
Just so that we can, because we haven't had one for a year, have we? I think.
Yeah, one very small, potentially very good thing. My friend Beata's come back from Poland, where she spoke to Batching Council, and they have given the name of 2 charities that they believe that we can potentially work with. I need to speak to her properly to get everything, but yeah, potentially very good news.
Excellent. Well done, well done you. There was something on Facebook yesterday about, I got tagged in something about a bake sale on the market, something like that. I told them to email and see what's what.
we did speak to somebody about that, but because we need liability insurance and things, and they haven't got them. But what I told Karen to do was to speak to the Baptist Church and see if there's anything whether they could do it in the number 1, and also speak to St Peter's if they can do something in the church. So we just sort of pointed in other directions.
I'm going to try and drop in. I was going to try and do it last week, and it happened this Friday or the following Friday to the Baptist group.
Yes.
There's lots of people
Yes.
turning up. It's all
Yeah,
very
we're
good.
going to.
So thank you very much for pushing that through. Nothing from me. The quickest in the world, but we did a lot done.
Good.
Thank you very much indeed. Oh, I can bang that. Feel the Cool